Okay, it's September 21st. We'll call the meeting to order of Sustainable Westborough. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we will be conducting this meeting remotely via this Zoom meeting. It is available. It is being recorded and will be available after the meeting to anyone who requests it. It's available. These are open meetings, so anybody can use the link that was posted on the website to attend the meeting. First order of business is to approve the August minutes. And I think I saw Eric had no changes. My only comment on the minutes were mentioned earlier. The GSA and Global Solutions Act should have the W in the warning added.
Global Warming Solutions Act, right?
Yeah, Global Warming Solutions Act and GWSA.
Two places. Yep.
Two places on what, GWSA?
Yeah, GWSA and Global Warming Solutions Act.
Yes. Yeah.
Six lines down.
Are you seeing my screen?
No, I'm looking at the thing itself.
Okay, so I've highlighted it on mine. So those two and the red text, I think, is all acceptable unless somebody wants to provide another spelling of intervener. Does anybody else have other revisions to the minutes or comments on the minutes? So do we have a motion to accept?
I make a motion. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Let me make sure I see none, but I see none. Okay, unanimous acceptance of the minutes. Second agenda item was to discuss the Green Community Competitive Grant Award. And Cheryl, could you give us an update on that? I did send out an email midday today. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw. Yep. Thanks. So I didn't prepare slides. Sorry, I was really busy doing homework today. But so we got the grant award for the full value we asked for, as I'm sure everybody heard, which was $153,876. And that money goes specifically for 4 LED interior upgrading lighting projects in descending value, order value at Armstrong, the fire station, town hall, and the senior center. And then we also asked for the money for 2 hybrid police cruisers, just for the different, they contribute the difference for getting the hybrid. So that's $5,000 each. And although we did tell the state that town meeting passed 1, they just left it in there and gave us the money for 2. And the police chief today said that, or someone at the police department today, they said that they already have ordered the first one and they are going to ask for the second one at the fall town meeting. So I think it'll work out all right, because I noticed in the paperwork that we got that, so we got the contract paperwork for the grant, which the town officials have to fill out and sign and stuff and send it back to the Department of Energy Resources, who manages the grants. And the contract begins on the signature date so DOR gets the contracts back and they sign off. So that's when the contract begins. And the contract will end on September of 2021. So a year from now, I noticed that. So I'm not sure if the work should be done when the contract ends or if we still have leeway to finish. Do you know, Pete?
I thought I didn't read the contracts themselves, but in the cover, I thought it said we had 2 years.
Okay, so I don't know. This was talking specifically about the validity of the contract. So I'm not sure why it would end. Maybe they forgot to change that or something. But okay, anyway, we're getting the paperwork signed. They're sending it back, hopefully. And then after that, I guess our job will be kind of prodding the participants, make sure they're doing what they have to do to execute the projects with Energy Source. And thank you to Carol Fisher for the Facebook page write-up she did, because we got about getting the grant. It was very nice. And also she did a nice write-up, which was published in the Community Advocate on September 16th. I sent the link around to just about everybody, I think. So thanks for that.
So
Pete, you want to add something?
Yeah, that's a good update. As you said, the town manager needs to sign the contract, which probably is going to have a lawyer review and stuff before that. Important, there's kind of two important dates. The one you mentioned of how long is the contract effective, and make sure we spend the money in time. But the earlier date is that we want to apply for another round of competitive grants, and we'll need to spend all of this money before we can apply for the next round of competitive grants. And last year, that deadline was like February 1st. So I think our focus should be on quick execution so that we can apply for another round of competitive grant money next year.
Right.
And the LED projects are pretty straightforward compared to some of the weatherization stuff, which has more nuance to it. So I think we should be able to do that. The police are clearly moving fast on they've already ordered the one cruiser. So we should be able to achieve that goal of spending it all and getting the projects to a completion state so that we can apply again next year for another round. Thank you again, Cheryl, for your work in putting this together. And I did have one other thing in the green community space, which I didn't think of when I was doing the minutes, doing the agenda. Eileen, you and I had talked about that there's a requirement for an annual Mass Energy Insight report, which is, I think, due in November or December. So it's not like urgent, but I just wanted to remind you that we had talked about that. Are you still available to do that?
Yeah. We should talk about exactly what I'm going to be doing. I mean, I can't imagine that it's terribly time consuming. So yeah.
I have not done it, and yes, we'll have to investigate what else. I think there's probably going to be a pretty standard report we have to submit.
Yeah.
And it's part of it is making sure the Mass Energy Insight data is kept up to date. When we had talked in this, I can't even remember, it couldn't have been the spring because we weren't allowed to sit next to each other in the library.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was a long time ago. Yeah, last fall.
So last fall or whenever, early in the year, whenever we talked about it, one of the things was to get the DPW to provide us the liquid fuel reports and, the gasoline and diesel and so forth.
Yeah, and I did get it, for that time frame that, I did get it.
Okay, so we'll need to have it through the end of the fiscal year because we're going to report on a fiscal year basis.
Okay.
And so maybe you could ping them on that, and then you and I could get together and try to figure out what an annual report entails.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else on green communities? I think
with the sun, you know what I mean? So it simulates sunshine.
somebody has some background
I have like several.
that are going. The only other thing, I can't remember if I mentioned it in the previous meeting, but the
Sorry, Pete, can you keep an eye for Lee, because I sent her the link also and she answered thank you, so she might be waiting to get in.
Sustainable Westborough.
Um,
You're happy?
So
Have
Lee,
you to be on the
Lee-
couch?
That's what I want.
Lee, are you on the call? There was somebody labeled iPhone, and I think that's where the background noise was coming from. So I've muted them. The Green Community Designation Grant, the annual report, the EV charging stations, I think I did mention it at the previous meeting, the charging station installation has been started. It still hasn't been completed at the golf course, but it was good to see that it's been initiated at least. Next thing I wanted to do was to provide an update on the climate action plan. And what I thought I would do, what I'm planning to do, is to provide you the update I'm going to give to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow night, which of course gives me the chance to practice the key points and take your feedback. The climate action plan is making good progress. We made progress through the all the remote meetings, and the COVID challenges has not really slowed us down significantly. The challenge in a climate action plan for a municipality is that the reality is we need to make pretty dramatic changes as a society to impact our emissions, and we need to move aggressively. But if Westborough by itself moves aggressively and the towns around us and the state around us don't move as aggressively, it becomes potentially burdensome economically or otherwise to the local community. So we need to both make dramatic change as well as to encourage others to make dramatic change that's needed for greenhouse gas mitigation. So parts of what you'll be seeing is trying to establish that balance and understand what the state is doing and what we should be doing in regard to encouraging others to move forward aggressively. Many of the tools we need to make these changes are beyond our control, direct control. It needs to come from the state, or it needs to come from town meeting vote and so forth. So it's not something that as a climate action plan task force we can just decide to do. So we're going to be navigating all of that uncertainty and ambiguity over the years ahead. Start out with what is the climate action plan goal? And so we've created the task force to create a climate action plan for Westborough by March of 2021, which will make the dramatic changes that we need over the next 30 years. It's comprehensive of all of the market segments, municipal, residential, industrial, and commercial. And it's including buildings and transportation and electric supply and anything else that we feel is materially impacting our greenhouse gas emissions. The Global Warming Solution Act established 40% townwide greenhouse gas emissions reduction by 2030 and 80% townwide, statewide, and the climate action plan is replicating that 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. But we also have established that if and when the state sets stricter standards, Westborough's climate action plan will be adjusted to whatever standards the state has accepted. This is a summary of the goal and the governance document that we published in the spring, April of this year.
Pete,
Pete, just a small comment. You know, my understanding is that there is, you know, a waste plank, albeit waste isn't a big factor, but we have a waste goal that is tied to the climate action plan. So maybe you want to mention waste in the prior slide.
So if you would, hold your questions to the end and see if I address the issues you feel need to be addressed. So in the initial phase, we have done a greenhouse gas inventory for the town using a tool that came from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC. And with that tool, we have identified by sector, transportation, building, heating, electricity, and so forth, including waste, all of the components which we can identify, and then subdivided that by the market segment. And as shown in this slide, 4 categories represent over 80%, 83% of the total greenhouse gas emissions of the town. The largest, significantly larger really by any other subcategory, is the residential vehicle emissions. Commercial and industrial is a dominant factor, both in the electricity and the building heating. And residential heating is the 4th category in regard to greenhouse gas emissions. So our focus is to focus primarily on these 4 segments, although we have activities identified for all of the categories. These are the greatest opportunities for us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. One of the things that I think is really critical is that the state has been very active and continues to be very active in changing our goals as new science comes out. And Governor Baker declared a net zero by 2050 goal in the State of the State address in January. And through activities that came out of that with EEA, that has been refined to include a 85% reduction in emissions, plus the net zero requirement by 2050. In addition to the administrative side of the government, the legislative side has been working and have some very significant climate bills, both from the House and Senate, and they're now in conference committee. These have very extensive and new requirements, and I've highlighted a few points, such as 50% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030 and 75% by 2040. These types of changes, whether it's coming through administrative actions from Governor Baker or legislative actions, are continuing to push the state along, and that benefits us as a community as we're looking for programs and clarity on what we need to focus on. One of the parts of Global Warming Solutions Act is that they've established an implementation advisory committee. And this implementation advisory committee is a large group of experts from around the state, both within the government as well as scientists and environmental advocates and volunteers of different domains of expertise. And their work is ongoing. It is work that is going to progress through the next 10 to 12 months. Their draft document right now have the key metrics proposed. Couple of points I wanted to make. One is that the Implementation Advisory Committee is not working on the 85% that EEA has established, but they're working on a 90% by 2050 goal. However, what they're really focused on is the 2030 metrics. What are the things that have to be done? What are the policies and procedures that need to be put in place for 2030. And I want to highlight a couple of these. One is they've identified that they believe that we need to have 1 million heat pumps implemented by 2030. 1 million heat pumps represents about 40% of the households in Massachusetts. This is a pretty dramatic goal and a pretty dramatic change. Another key one that I'd highlight is that they recommended 1 million electric vehicles. And again, 1 million electric vehicles is almost 25% of the light duty vehicles that are on the registered in Massachusetts today. So these are pretty bold actions, and we'll need to have very significant programs that the Climate Action Plan and the follow-up activities can bring into Westborough to affect the change to achieve the goals we're setting for ourselves. This work is ongoing. The expectation is that the final Clean Energy and Climate Plan and the emissions limit for 2030 will be published in March of 2021, which is the same deadline we're working to. So we're working in parallel. All of this analysis is ongoing. It's in draft state. We're keeping informed of it, but it's changing, and we need to stay abreast of it. The Climate Action Plan is designed with the overarching goal that was mentioned earlier, and then we've established 17 what we call sector goals for the 4 working group sectors, as well as some goals that span all of the sectors. And under the sector goals, we have strategies. And these are activities we plan to propose and make recommendations that the town follow up aggressively on in order to achieve these goals. In the time we have available for the meeting, I'm not planning to go through all of these details, but I will give some highlights. So the 17 sector goals are highlighted here. I'd like to focus on and highlight that these, I believe, are the most impactful and most important. And if we start out from right to left, in the building, heating, and the transportation, the number one thing we need to do is electrification. We need to get electric vehicles to be much more prevalent, as shown on the earlier slide, and electrify our heating systems using heat pumps. We also need to get our electricity sources to a higher renewable and clean energy, carbon-free sources of electricity. These are the biggest things that are going to change the greenhouse gas emissions in the community. All of the other activities underneath these are supportive of that and helpful, but those are the ones that really move the numbers the most dramatically and address the 4 big categories that were highlighted in the earlier slide. 2 activities that are kind of foundational to the ones that I mentioned is we need to make sure that we are in line and working with National Grid in regard to its is the National Grid infrastructure able to support renewable energy build out, electrification, other changes that are going to be needed for the grid modernization as this transition goes. And our objective is to partner with National Grid so that we know what their plans are and we're taking advantage of their plans, and we're telling them what our plans are so that we can set expectations for what they need to do in our local area. As implied or as suggested in the comments about the dynamic nature of all of this, there is no plan we could write today that would be stable for 10 plus years. So a key activity is to have staffing, and by staffing I mean whether it's employees or volunteers or committees identified who are responsible for implementing these plans over time and continuing the activity of being aware of what's going on at the state, what state programs are available. These two, the two with the brown text, are kind of foundational support for the other activities. I'll go through the other sectors quickly. Awareness, I think a key challenge is that in everybody's busy life, it's going to be hard to get everybody in Westborough, most people in Westborough, aware that we have a climate action plan and what their role is and what the needs are for people, the changes that people need to be making. Advocacy is in regard to our relationship with the state government, whether it's our legislative delegation or the administrative sides like DOER. We need to have relationships with these organizations to understand what their programs are, making sure we're taking advantage of them, and tell them what we think we need in order to achieve the goals of the climate action plan. In both electricity use and building heating use, there's opportunities for energy efficiency. We're not going to get 88, 90% reduction through energy efficiency, but energy efficiency can help us lower the cost of transition and can be significantly improved from where we are today, including things like new building codes, you know, this is like mass save on steroids. It's also can be new building codes and other changes that are structural in the regulatory space. Energy use disclosure, I think, is an important way to help people become aware of how they're using energy and to reward people who make the investment in high efficiency buildings, you know, low, you know, high insulation values and so forth. So I think energy use disclosure is a valuable tool for helping reduce the building heating demands. In the transportation space, there is opportunity in public transportation. Vast majority of Westborough commuters are not commuting in the direction where there is train service, but there is new bus service in town. I think there's opportunities for some reduction in vehicle use through public transportation, and I think we should work toward optimizing that. Similarly, bike and pedestrian can eliminate some vehicle use, and I think it's beneficial in many dimensions in regard to quality of life. In the land, waste, and other, the two big categories in regard to land management, one is to preserve open space, the other is to increase the tree canopy and the forest quality in town, both to support carbon sequestration and reduction of loss of that sequestration from cutting down trees. Waste is a key environmental issue. The amount of emissions that comes from our waste, based on the modeling we've done, is a small percent of the total, but we think that waste reduction and moving into recycling and composting is greatly beneficial to the community and to the environment beyond greenhouse gases and should be part of our plan. One of the segments that surprised us was how much the modeling says we have in off-road and construction emissions. So we need to have a plan for addressing that, and that's basically one of the areas we have the least understanding of. For each of those segments, we have developed a goal statement beyond the high-level summary I had in the first slide, and a list of proposed actions, whether it's bylaws or policies on purchasing electric vehicles in the municipal fleet, actions to improve the commuter rail and so forth. So we have strategies, and we're expanding those strategies into more detail. We are just at the beginning of our communication plan. We have had meetings with the town manager, meeting with the Board of Selectmen tomorrow, beginning meetings with other groups in town, Sustainable Westborough, and the other town committees, and we'll be starting reaching out to the various clubs like Rotary and Westborough Community Land Trust. The final phase is to get into direct contact with residents, and the key point on this is that reaching out to residents in the COVID world means large Zoom meetings, and we're going to have to plan that in the later in the year. I think it's important, again, to improve the awareness of the community about the Climate Action Plan and to get feedback from them concerning what we're proposing, what's well received and what's not. The commercial and industrial, as stated earlier, is a big part of our greenhouse gas emissions in the community. And that's going to require a different style of more one-on-one meetings, maybe small groups sponsored by the Economic Development Committee. And so we have a lot of work to do in regard to commercial and industrial outreach. The timeline for this outreach is shown here. It's starting in September, starting now, and running through the middle of December, such that we have feedback from the community and from the key stakeholders, which we can fold into our climate action plan, which will be published and approved by March. So at this point, I'll stop and ask for questions or feedback on what you've seen.
I have several questions, but first one more toward the beginning of the presentation. I think it was the second slide. You showed that the state requirements or the state goals for the town were 40% by 2030, but I wanted to know, where are we now in 2020 in relation to the goal of 40% by 2030?
That's a fair question. I don't see, these goals are based on a 1990 baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have this data for 1990. So what we're going to have to do is assume that Westborough has made the same transition from 1990 to the present as the state as a whole, and the state has those reports, or some of that is still in the works, and we'll take our pro rata share. And then, so of the 40%, probably 20% of it has been achieved already. But in the next 10 years, just using these numbers, we'd need to do another 20%. If the goal changes, such as the plans that are in the legislature, it might even be more than 40% reduction by 2030. It could be 50% reduction by 2030.
Makes sense, thanks.
Other questions?
Hey, Pete, this is Deb. I'm just wondering where, you might have said this and I missed it. Where did you get the, oh gosh, now I'm blinking. Where did you get the where did you get like the understanding of this is going to lower emissions this much and this is going to lower emissions that much? Like, for instance, how electric vehicles are, you know, the central metric for, you know, lowering transportation emissions here. Like, where was that from? Where did that data come from?
There is not data in the rich sense that you may be asking. We can't prove that we're going to achieve 40% by 2030. We don't have the staff of engineering talent to do that analytics. It is my opinion and the opinion of the folks working on the task force, and particularly the transportation segment, that by electrification, we, even using current sources of electricity today, we'd have a dramatic reduction of greenhouse gases per vehicle mile. And I think that's provable. I can't do it for you today, and I haven't really actually done it in detail, but I do believe it's true today. And then as the electric sources improve, the emissions go beyond what's available with the sources today. My point when I did this little build here is I find it very encouraging that what we had put together and what the Implementation Advisory Committee, which does have staffs of scientists and engineers and policy people, are basically looking at the same priorities as what we are identifying. Are you doubtful of that?
No, I was just curious. I guess, you know, from my side, it seems to me like getting everybody into electric vehicles is not really going to do everything that we need. We actually need to get people into public transit more, even though it theoretically, I guess I have a hard time decoupling increasing transit and also lowering emissions. Like, it just seems to me like that's also something that, you know, especially in an equity lens. And I know here out in Westborough, we have a much, you know, less dense community in terms of trying to figure out how public transit would work. But anyways,
yeah, I mean,
that's what I was thinking about when I asked.
I do have data in regard to the where do people who live in Westborough work, and using that as a proxy for how much of the commuter traffic could we impact. And I think it is very little, unless there is rapid transit that's planned to go up and down 495, you know, up and down 128. There's just not a viable public transit strategy anywhere on the horizon that addresses reduction of vehicle mile traveled by moving it to public transit.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right. You know, like one of the things that I think about is just, you know, even the commuter rail, if that was just a regular common, you know, if that just ran much more frequently, people from Westborough could take that in when they go to a baseball game much more, you know, like, because right now you have to wait a couple hours and it takes an hour and a half, like, because they're all local trains off of commuter times. Anyways, I was just thinking about that, like, just in terms of, you know, as a real strategy, we have to do better than just getting people into EVs. But I know for now, that's kind of the understood, you know, the overall strategy.
I don't want it to, it's a point that could be debated, and I don't want to exactly take the time to debate it now, but I'd be happy to go offline and get your thoughts. But if we look at making a change in the next 10 years, I don't think there's a realistic way of reducing vehicle miles traveled by Westborough people through public transit in the next 10 years. But I do see an opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by electrification.
Point taken.
And in 50 years, could we do public transit and replace, yeah, maybe in 50 years. But it's like, new electric rail systems through paths that we don't envision, we are not even contemplating today. That's like a 30 or 50-year build out. And if we're talking electric buses, maybe electric buses on demand. One of the things we've highlighted is the VIA experiment going on in town. And could that be electrified? And if that was significantly successful, could that reduce some of the local driving, local meaning to within Westborough or to neighboring towns? I think there's some opportunity there, but again, do you think you could impact 30% or 50% of people's driving with a bus system? I doubt it. So anyway, other, by Deb or by anybody, any other questions?
I did have another question, actually a comment. The slide where you had the chart with all the areas that you were going to attack, and you highlighted the ones, yeah, this one. So you did highlight the clean sources for electricity, but since so much electrification has to go on, it's really vital that we use renewable sources for the grid, or else we're not really going to save much. I mean, it'll make a difference, but unless we clean up the grid, we're not going to achieve our goals. So, which I know you know that, and it says clean sources and everything. And you talked about having National Grid working on their infrastructure, but I do think that's something really, and maybe as a town we don't have that much control over it, but I do think it's a really important thing to emphasize, that we somehow incentivize as a town for getting our energy from clean sources, or for in general the state to acquire its energy through clean sources.
Yeah.
Also for electric vehicles, because we did actually get one in March, and one experience as just a resident with an electric vehicle is you've got to set up your charging station at home and stuff. So that's something that might intimidate people or possibly keep them from going electric. So as part of the, say, outreach, you could maybe disseminate some information about that part of it for people to feel comfortable, because when you buy the car, they really don't get into it with you about charging. So
so we have had discussions around various education programs like that, whether it's air source heat pumps or EV experience, and to have it come from residents, kind of trusted residents versus a salesman. So we have that as a strategy. As well as building code, potentially over time, building code changes that require all new residential construction to be EV ready, EV charging stations at all multifamily, multi-tenant buildings, whether it's commercial or residential, to have EV charging, et cetera.
is the climate action plan addressing in any way other than building envelope work, the pre-existing physical infrastructure emissions? Because the new building, you can make codes for new buildings and stuff, but there's very, very little of that compared to what's already there.
I think that's an important point, so that as we continue to build out places like the state hospital property, we're probably building that with the wrong infrastructure, and we need to move quickly to stop building incorrect infrastructure. And then there's a more expensive process of retrofitting legacy buildings that have already been built. And some of that can be done, what some energy efficiency improvements can be made. Some of it is done, you know, when your furnace goes out, do you buy an air source heat pump or a ground source heat pump to replace your furnace? Or do you replace it with another natural gas furnace? So you need to have the information in, you have to have made the decision before your furnace goes, because when your furnace goes, it's an emergency and it's much easier to compromise and get your furnace up and running using the thing you already have been running.
Yeah, and Cheryl, I just want to say, like, all the issues that you're bringing up, they're like right on, like in terms of, you know, clean energy, and also, you know, how do we deal with dirty infrastructure. And I really think that it's going to be advocacy on the statewide level. It's important that Westborough helps push the state in that direction. So, you know, like anytime that you add heat pumps to a house, you have to insulate it, because they just won't work in this region without really tight envelopes. So that has to be part of figuring out, you know, not only what the scope of the project, but the cost of the project to, you know, add 1 million heat pumps to existing buildings.
I will send these slides around, and I will be presenting them tomorrow night to the Board of Selectmen. Thank you for your patience and listening to my dry run.
I just have one last question for you, Pete, which is about the, I'm like obviously I've been working for too long, but about the off-road emissions, like, does that just mean from construction sites? Does that mean from building? Like, does that mean from landscape? Like, what is that?
It's all of that. The off-road is all of that, landscaping, lawnmowers and weed trimmers and blowers and construction equipment. The modeling tools are pretty coarse in that area, not very accurate. They use Worcester County averages and stuff, so it's not very accurate. And it's not clear what a town like Westborough could do to change any of that. But it's also, if you go back to this slide, it's not one of the bigger segments. I mean, it's bigger than, I guess it's the 6th largest.
Yeah, Pete, just one thing to consider that's in this category, and I'm pretty sure they enacted this as a law in DC, is I think that they kind of banned the leaf blowers that run, that you put the gas into, because they actually spew a ton of emissions. They can be like just as bad as a car. So that could be like one where, you know, maybe it's a baby step for town residents to kind of, you know, tackle that first, or make that a mandate for the landscaping companies, and then, you know, eventually people get there with their vehicles.
I have read a study out of California where they did the calculation of how much leaf blowers, because they're 2-cycle, they're very inefficient, and beyond just greenhouse gases, the particulates that they spew, how damaging they are. How, you know, taking that to town meeting to pass a bylaw that bans that would be a hard sell. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I'm just saying that's an example of something that's better done at a larger footprint level, a state level, in my opinion.
Okay.
Where you could have experts and stuff go in and quantify it all. Having Sustainable Westborough or some town of Westborough committee put together the analysis to justify that change, I think it would be a hard sell.
Okay.
I will stop sharing, and actually what I want to do is go back to the agenda. So that was the climate action plan, and the master plan. We are reviewing. The master plan has restarted. They put a 90-day pause on the process. The master plan is just restarting now. They had their first kind of tentative restart meeting last week. And over the next month, more news will be coming out from the master plan. My main concern is to make sure that the climate action plan is integrated with the master plan so that we get the support and weight of the master plan in our efforts. Westborough Power Choice Communication Plan. Carol and Eileen, could you give an update, please?
So I think everybody knows already we're assisting with the rollout of the new Westborough Power Choice contract. This is for a townwide aggregated electricity program, which really just means it's group purchased and group negotiated. Just as a reminder, it's going to give us 36 months of a fixed price, and the price is really competitively good. Our standard plan offers 20% additional renewable energy. So just by being passive and not doing anything, you'll end up in the standard plan. And whenever you use your heat, you know, you're helping to lower Westborough's carbon footprint. We had our first of 2 presentations. It was a public information session. Eileen gave this really good presentation of a PowerPoint and prepared questions. It went really, really well. Shelby Marshall gave this really super enthusiastic pitch at the end of it, which was really wonderful. And we got very, very positive feedback from Westborough TV, which was also just very nice to hear. The second presentation is going to be this Wednesday night. It will be on Westborough TV's YouTube channel. It's advertised in a bunch of different places right now, but just by going to Westborough TV, you can see it there and get on that way, as well as on Verizon 28 and Charter 192. By now, everyone should have received an email giving them this information. Some of the things that get discussed in the presentation are where electricity comes from, what is an aggregation, how to know which program you're signed up for, and even where this is on your own electricity bill. Also how to sign up for Westborough Power Choice, how to change plans, and also a slide that talks about predatory electricity plans, which is super relevant to a lot of people right now. I know my phone is constantly ringing with not legitimate offers. Ultimately, both of these presentations are going to be edited by Westborough TV, and links will be made widely available. The most important vehicle for communications is going to be the Mass Power Choice website. It's not really complete until October 8th, when prices and plans are going to go live. But it is up right now, and you can see the information on it. You can get there on our town website on the homepage of the Westborough um, town website. There's a big logo right there, Westborough Power Choice, and you can click on it, and it's a fast link to the Westborough Power Choice website. As well, you could go on to Sustainable Westborough's page. Also find a fast link, but no logo. And the permanent links also, oh, there you go. The permanent link links to the Westborough Power Choice website. And also we have links to the brochure if anybody wants that. Physical brochures should be coming out the first week in October. They'll be in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. We'll be giving them out at the food pantry, Youth and Family Services, the Veterans Council, and possibly the library. And if anybody else thinks of any other place they should be, you should let us know. We have ads for our presentation right now on Patch. We should have it on Wicked Local. Whenever I put something on Wicked Local, I see, 60 seconds to a confirmation, and I never get the confirmation. In the past, it hasn't mattered. It's been there. I'm hoping that it's there now, but I'll check that. Community advocate, I always hit a wall. I don't know why. If anyone has any ideas on how to actually get them to print our events, that would be great. Then in terms of different committees and clubs, Eileen presented to the Rotary Club already, and that went well. I think she and John will be presenting to Westborough Civic Club on October 6th. Westborough Council on Aging has been contacted a few times, but it doesn't sound like they want a presentation, but they do want physical brochures. Same for Youth and Family Services, and also for Veterans Advisory Board. Westborough Connects turned us down, as Cheryl suspected they would, for sharing the information, even though Kelly is personally very supportive and gave us a lot of ideas of other people to contact. I still kind of feel like, I don't know, if like Shelby could help us in dispersing this information, because I do feel like we're getting the same people over and over again, but that we're missing a large part of the town. So that's something to discuss. The Westborough Environmental Collaborative, we have not yet really reached out to, because I thought that would be better once we have a permanent link, once Westborough TV puts up the permanent link. Same for faith groups. So this way we'll go out once and have the permanent link, and people can view it whenever they want to. It won't really have a...
Carol, an opportunity that you could jump on and there's still time for is the next water bill is coming out. And if you want to get into the water bill mailer, there is a possibility of doing that. Whatever it is you want to propose to get in would need to be in there October 1st. So we got into the January water bill with the waste survey and the recycle flyer. So it's definitely doable.
How does that work? Who pays for that?
The town does. The town does. So they're already doing a mailing. And so they don't, like in our case, the mailing's already going out. And so they added one page got added to the mailer. I believe it was like another page of paper, but we didn't have to pay for it. It's just a matter of, proposing it, to the town and making their deadlines.
Who is the person that you proposed to? Like, who do you?
Well, I have to look through my mails, because like Steve Bakari found out the name for me, and we were thinking of putting in something in the next mail about the composting at the transfer station.
Right.
But I just don't think we're ready to do that, because it's too, like, the mailer is coming out before we even like launch it and really know what it's going to look like. But I can send you the name of who to coordinate it with, and we did it last time. So I think the main thing would be is who could be like your, like Steve Bakari, you know, who could be like your person on the inside to facilitate it happening once you write up whatever it is you want to write up.
Okay, that's a great idea. Thank you. That's great.
Yep.
Okay.
So Carol, the other thing I was thinking, just wanted to mention this, and I don't know if we can really, you know, tackle all these languages or not, but I did notice, like, when the school sends out stuff, you know, they're sending it out, like, you know, in X number of languages, and maybe obviously, like, all this content can't be like translated, but maybe at least like an initial blurb could be translated into these various languages that the Gibbons, you know, is sending content out to. So must mean that they have like families who, you know, only speak Arabic, only speak Tamil, and then maybe that could at least prompt somebody in the family to say, okay, who's our English speaking member of the family who could go to the website and find out more about it.
So the website itself is translated into a plethora of languages, like more languages
cool.
than I recognize. But the physical brochures are not. But I don't know that most people, I would think it's mostly people who are maybe older, or I suppose there are some people who don't have access to computers who would need it. So we just made a guess based on the recommendations of the food pantry, who asked for only Spanish and Portuguese. Youth and Family Services thought Arabic, but the food pantry said no. The population they have, I guess, is more proficient in English, and they didn't think that would be a problem. So that's what we went with.
So
Okay, no, it was just the idea.
those are good ideas, and you know, even just one sentence in multiple languages might be enough to trigger it.
Yeah, that was my thought, Pete. Not just like one sentence.
Yeah.
Go here to find out more, but that's it.
So,
and Carol, on the water bill, let me know if I can help on that. I can send notes to Christy or whatever. They'd be supportive of that. I think it's a very good idea in this short time horizon. So just let me know if I can help.
thanks. Okay. I will say that I've reached out to all of the school groups, as well as Westborough neighbors. Westborough neighbors will be sharing the information, but on the school groups, I think we only got a response from, I want to say Armstrong, and everybody else just let it go. And I think, like Kelly, there's a discomfort. It kind of maybe feels like they're promoting, you know, business or something, you know, and I do wonder if it needs, you know, Christy's name on it or Shelby's name on it, or I don't know. So I don't know how everyone else feels about that. Is it worth it or not? But my sense is it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and it's coming from me, and they don't know me from Adam. And
I think this is a particularly bad time to deal with school parents and school groups. Maybe several months from now, we might want to revisit, but frankly, all the angst over what's happening with your kids, I think, you know, this is not on school parents' minds, I bet. Maybe we could try it again in December or something.
I think that's valid. I'll also, I'm presenting the climate action plan to the school committee in the first week of October. And one of the things I was going to ask them was on our kind of awareness goal that we had talked about is to get their assistance, basically the way you're trying to with this one program, to do it on an ongoing basis, to be a conduit for reaching into the community, into the families. They're the number one contact for most families in the community. And can they sign up and have some programmatic way of supporting communication around this? I wasn't speaking specifically to Westborough Power Choice, but more generic. How does how do their communication tools, and Amber was open to the idea in a generic sense.
So at this point, John makes a really good point.
I totally agree with John's point
yeah.
too.
On the other hand, a lot of people are going to be getting their bills, and if they're paying attention, they might see like a jump up in rates. So, just to think about that, like how do you have the information out there and not bother anybody with it? I don't know.
So I think we're doing a fabulous job in outreach, and we're hitting as many buttons as we possibly can.
Okay.
You didn't mention the Frank and Mary show. We're going to be on Shelby's show, which is another kind of demographic quirky thing that goes on that I think might be helpful. The only other thing I thought of as you were talking was, if somebody gets one of those bills and they call town hall, who are they going to speak to, and does that person know what's going on? So just having some town go-to person, somebody in the town manager's office that says, okay, that's not a problem. It's Westborough Power Choice. It's the Westborough program. Here's your support phone number. Thank you very much, blah, blah, whatever. They just have a script and they redirect into the right pocket. That was the only other thought I had as you were talking.
Okay. Okay. And then I just wanted to finish up the other. So there's the Frank and Mary show. For anyone who doesn't know, it's geared towards senior citizens. And Pete and Eileen, I think, are going to be on that show coming up very soon.
I haven't talked to Eileen yet.
Okay. All right. Well, whatever. 2 people will be on that show. And then we have an electronic signboard that's up and running on corner of Main and Lyman. The billboard, the giant billboards at each end of town. That will probably be up in the next few days. And finally, Facebook. We have a few posts up there. But as always, with social media, it's so dependent on other people engaging with it. So if you just take a minute and repost any of our Facebook promotions to any other page, your own page, it doesn't matter if you use Facebook once every 3 years, just move that thing or comment on it, and it really kind of bumps it up to the top, makes a big difference. So, all right, that was everything.
Thank you. And I'll follow up offline with Eileen on the Frank and Mary show and see if that's going to work. Schedule-wise, or time-wise, we're down to the last 10 minutes or so. John, could you give us an update on Eversource pipeline and strategies and actions that are going on regarding to that?
Sure, just a quick summary of where we are. So I think we've said in the last time the town met with Eversource in late July for Eversource to answer a bunch of questions. The town officials and many residents felt that the answers are very inadequate. The town sent a letter to Eversource on August 11th, outlining 14 points they wanted answers on. Just this last Friday, Eversource replied, so it took them 5 weeks to basically a five-page letter that really didn't provide, in my view, anything fundamentally new. They are simply going forward with a pipeline as far as they're concerned. They're going to file with the state for approval. They contend that the pipeline is necessary and there are absolutely no alternatives in their view to doing this. And they also want to point out that they think they are very climate and environmentally sensitive and are doing the very best possible job. They're sort of greenwashing themselves. It's a very odd letter in my view. Happy to send it around to anybody who'd like to see it. I think the concern I have is that they're trying to position themselves as the good guys and just having to do us for business reasons. And they're really totally ignoring the Global Warming Solutions Act, state goals, and they totally sidestep saying anything about the fact that this is diametrically opposed to what the state is trying to do. And so that's what makes it very odd. One of the things, aside from making sure that all our selectmen and our representatives in town understand this, I'm interested in launching a campaign to get people to contact their state representatives and our state senator in the next, in a fairly short order, to urge them to talk to their colleagues on the Senate House Climate Committee. This, I think Pete mentioned it earlier, it's a committee to take the two versions of climate bills produced so far in the Senate and House and come up with a consolidated bill. There's a number of very important provisions in there, which would include things like improved building codes, closer mandatory dates for timelines for reducing emissions, and changing the mandate of the Department of Public Utilities to have to take climate concerns into account, even though the Global Warming Solutions Act was passed 12 years ago. The Department of Public Utilities has seen fit to do nothing to change its regulations to line up with that bill. So it will probably take legislative action to do that. So there's, if any of you are interested in that, I will send out information later this week, and I would like to urge everybody to contact their legislatures. I'll provide, sort of general information about how to do that. And if we can get a number of people to contact each of our 3 state legislatures and some of you to contact our state senator, that may help give them impetus to work on their colleagues to get this bill, the best possible bill, together before the end of the year. I know I spoke a little fast. Is that any questions, or did I go over anything a little fast? I'm sorry if I did.
Just John, that would be very helpful if you kind of just gave us some suggested talking points to reach out. I got a phone call from Senator Eldridge the other day. He's having some gathering fundraiser in town, and hopefully the timing will work out. I could button home in person when hopefully we cross paths in the next few weeks.
Right, right. Yes, I think buttonholing people in person, if you have that, you're making a phone call. I will summarize what you could do, and anybody can do it. I think the more our representatives hear from local residents in their districts, the more likely it is this will bubble up the top. I mean, there's all there. So if I can get a half a dozen out of each district, that would be, I think, a big help.
Westborough's 3 representatives are on our side on this topic.
I do not know. On the Frank and Mary show 2 weeks ago, Danielle Gregoire was interviewed, and she, for the first time, came out and said that she was against the pipeline. She did not state what she would do. She didn't say she would support legislation of this, that, other thing. She didn't make any statement of action she would take. I have yet to see statements from anybody else.
Hannah Kane is opposed.
Pardon me?
Hannah Kane is not a proponent of environmental anything. Dykema is.
But I haven't gotten a statement out of her other than she will follow these matters closely. That's the only, so we're sort of, we have fence sitters right now. And so that's why I think I want to get a number of people in each district to sort of call people and say, you need to do something for this. It's important for the state and it's important for the town. So I will expect to hear something from me in a few more days.
I think that's helpful, John. In one, kind of couple other comments on the Eversource. So Eversource will be taking this to the siting board, which is a key milestone. Our expectation is that will happen in, I would say, John, correct me, a month or 2. It's not.
Yeah, well, they were going to do it by September, but they're running out of September, so I don't know.
So
they've said simply they're preparing their.
It seems like that's pretty imminent. That becomes then a legal proceeding where the town of Westborough can file for intervenor status, and I believe we are planning to do that.
Yes.
That gives us a seat at the table in the DPU process, and we can raise our objections then within the DPU process. It is very, very difficult to fight once it's in this DPU process, but the town has the select the selectmen have been supportive of the process of fighting it in the DPU process.
So one of the issues I want to point out to people is this. So in the DPU process, we can say, for example, we all know as citizens that, this building out extra infrastructure to sell and use even more fossil fuel gas is exactly counter to what the state goals are in the Global Warming Solutions Act. But right now, it's sort of the whole burden is on Westborough to sort of bring this point up, because the state, none of the state agencies, none of the state administrations have any skin in the game. They're not really advocating for, to oppose this kind of thing, because the state administration, the governor's administration, this is true for both Patrick and Baker, they have not really caused the DPU to change what they're doing. So we're sort of, what really galls me is that it's a statewide challenge and Westborough is left holding the bag. It's really quite unfair. And we become sort of the pressure point, because the Eversource is a big multi-state company with thousands of employees, and they can basically push this through. And we have, very moderate resources. So we need to be smart, we need to be vocal, and we need to get our state representatives really understanding that is their duty to uphold the law and to push for the right stuff.
John, I have a question for you, which is, do you need help in writing a script? Because I feel like even just everybody on this call could, call their state reps if we just had a script.
Yeah, I'm going to write a little background in the script that can be either a combination of call, maybe people want to call and send an email. I'm happy to, anybody wants to work with me on that. I'd like to get it together, and you and I have talked about possibly involving a number of other people that and I would, I think it would be really nice. I'd like to make it as easy as possible for people.
Yes, I think that's key.
Take a script and either use it verbatim or make whatever modifications that makes you feel more comfortable.
Quick question on that point. Deb, you might be a good person to answer this. I would imagine if you call the representative's office, you're going to get an aide, which isn't necessarily a problem. But is pretty much anyone who answers the phone the person you'd want to engage in? Or might Deb, as to what we're dealing with these the three state, state house and the center, whom we should ask to speak with?
I think they all have such small staffs that you can speak with whoever picks up the phone. I know Danielle Gregoire only has one person, for instance, besides herself. So yeah. I think, and I've found that she's very, she might not always give you the answer she wants, but she does respond. And you can do her either by email or calling. But yeah.
Sometimes what I've done is I prepare an email, then I call and I say, I've sent you an email, but here are my points, and I'm sending the email to reiterate these points, and I'd like to hear back from you. So they have it both verbally and in writing.
I think the reps themselves emails are public record, so you can send them directly to the reps and then call the office, as John just said.
You can also sometimes, you can call at night too. I mean, you can leave you have a clear, well-spoken message, you can leave it at night if you don't have time to call during the day.
Excellent. So that's an area we'll continue to track. And anything else for this evening's meeting? We're past the 8:30 time that I try to wrap up, but we did get a late start. Anybody else have any topics or issues to raise?
Just wanted to briefly mention that it looks like we are going to be moving forward with having composting at the transfer station. So we'll be working with the Board of Health to get that set up, and developing the appropriate promotional materials, and hoping we can collaborate to get the word out about composting, given that composting, organic waste is about 25% of your typical waste stream.
That's great news. Have you, in regard to composting from, for example, the school cafeterias, have you given any thought to how we might proceed in that area?
I'm not really gonna pursue anything on the school front at this time, just because I think the schools have too much, happening with just kind of dealing with the whole COVID-19.
Yeah.
But I think, going forward, I think the play for the school would be, I don't know how feasible it is that the school would want to, transport organic waste to the transfer station, because they would have probably significant quantities. But I would hope that maybe that could be something that could be within the school budget. And then maybe the school could either, contract with Black Earth, or look at who are your, various, commercial composters that they could, hopefully do a contract with. And maybe we're in a position to have that conversation at the end of this year, going into their next year cycle. But I just think right now, we've had various and sundry ideas tossed around about school stuff, but have just decided to wait because it's just really tough for the schools right now.
Understood. Thanks for that update. Anything else from anybody?
I was wondering about giving a presentation to the group, but it could be any time you think we have room in the agenda, because it would need about, at least 20 minutes.
Why don't you describe the presentation and for the
Okay.
group, just a
Mm-hmm.
summary.
Okay, so I was just thinking of doing, because I studied it a lot last semester, but doing a presentation on an element of what urban planners call smart growth, which is about urban planning that makes sense for positive growth in terms of environment and social justice. And there's an element of it called transit-oriented development, which is very well used in, big and medium-sized cities, elements of which could be used in more suburban areas. So I would just do a little presentation about how it's can be very effective for carbon efficiency and reduction in emissions. Let's say how urban planning can really be an assist in its visioning for climate change preparedness and reduction of greenhouse gases.
So I think having a 20-minute discussion of that would be useful. I think it'd be good context for all of us. I find it interesting.
Okay, so if you put it on the agenda, but if you think there's too many other things, it can just slide out as long as we need, but.
Okay, I made a note of that. And we'll try to get it in the next meeting. I think we are all set. I'll move for adjournment. And unless there's an objection, we can adjourn at this time. Thank you very much, everyone. Good discussion as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete, for all your work, and Cheryl and Carol and Eileen and all of you. Thank you so much.
Agreed. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you.